Hello, all. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. Um, hello, Pops, Pop Star, uh, Captain, and hold on, Pop Star, aka Abstinent. Okay, yeah, Pop Star, aka, I'm sorry, it took me a while. But anyway, thank you for being here. They say from the river to the sea, absolutely. Um, yeah, I got it eventually. I did get it eventually. Hello, Grip Gambler. Nice to see you here too. Hope you have any good one. Okay, yeah. So we're gonna have hanging chats again. Me and my good friend, Kobe. And so let's just get started. Mm, okay. I hope the music wasn't too loud. I feel like it was. Okay. Um, Pause that, and we are gonna go here. And okay, what happened here? Oh, it's this is right. Hold on, hold on. Um, Kobe, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can. Sorry, I was just reading something. I was distracted. How are you, my friend?
Yeah. Cardinals seem to be reading here, right? Taking in knowledge can only can only make for worse conversation. Thanks for being here, friend.
As always, thanks for having me. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. I slept through all of it. I have nothing to say for this day. Like the first predictive thing I've done the
I
entire
took a
week.
nap. I took a nap too. Unfortunately, when I was coming home from my friend's house, I hung out with a buddy last night after work. I was coming home from work, and the wonderful little light that comes on just shows you what the meaning of life. The light on the dashboard of my car came on. So I got to take my car into the repair shop on Monday. The check engine light came on. I was being kind of joking there. So fortunately, got the money to cover it. But one of the wonderful things about living in a car dependent society is every great once in a while I have to take my car to the mechanic and give them copious amounts of money so I can continue to go to work.
It's fun because not fun, but it's interesting. I had been watching a video about this from Some More News. You ever watch that channel?
I'm aware of them. Yeah, I know of them.
Oh, they're fantastic. I think they're really good. Like an informative channel, but they were specifically talking about self-driving cars, and how that's like not a thing now, and will probably not be a thing for a few decades. It seems, with the way things are going, unless there is a breakthrough right around the corner, like Elon Musk has been promising for years. Um, but anyway, like at the end of this video, um, it talked about like, are self-driving cars what we want, right? Um, do they think they'll solve the problems we have in our cities or exacerbate them? So, like, if we have more cars on the road that people feel like are safe, right? And a safe alternative. So just encourage car culture, basically, right? Um, it will increase um uh like traffic on the roads. It won't necessarily like be the green panacea people are talking about, like if it's a all EV fleet, because EV cars have like they just basically transfer the pollution somewhere else, right? To wherever we're mining the lithium from. So like it goes down a whole list of things. Um and it's like, well, in the end, what we really should be going for is increased mass transit. Like that makes for better cities where we just simply have less cars.
Yeah, earlier this year I went to New York City for the first time, and I was taken aback. It was super fun to go onto the just be able like just like, oh, we want to go get XYZ treat or food or wanted to go do thing, and you just hop on a subway, you just go. It's a very unique way of experiencing the city. Like it very much gives you an like I can definitely see why New York has a certain character. because in a lot of other cities in San Francisco, you see a little bit of San Francisco, and then you get in your car and you go to another part of San Francisco, and then you see a little part of San Francisco. And in fact, I don't know if you've ever been to San Francisco, but it's like notorious for being a nightmare to drive in. So nine
Mm.
times out of 10, the person operating the vehicle is like annoyed, in between, whatever little fun thing you're doing, and it's always like, oh, I'm going to go see, we're going to go to the, the whole spiel. So just being able to go there, you can, like, if you want to get drunk or have smoke something, or if that's what you're into, you can do that. If you want to stay out super late, it's awesome. So there's a lot of, I think there's a cultural, this is something I think a lot of left wing people talk about positively. There's a lot of like cultural stuff that a non car based society, cultural benefits that come with a non car based society.
So I haven't been to San Francisco. I've been to, I've been along the East Coast. That's where I live. And I've been to New York. I've been also to DC. DC is a awful place to, not drive, but uh, it's a awful place to try to park. So when you want to like actually get to the activity, right? You are circling trying to find places to park. But of course, you having your car only exacerbates that problem, Um, but I have been to other countries. I've been to Europe, I've been to Asia, where they have like mass transit, and it just makes the city more walkable and more friendly. And everything you basically just said, those characteristics exist in those other cities, where you'll get off at a stop and you can walk for a long way. You'll be walking to another stop maybe, and rather than immediately like centering. Basically, when you have a car, you park the car, like that's your like radius, right? Like, well, your distance you're tethered to that thing. You're gonna go back, right? You can't like stray too far from that. But when you don't have one and you're just relying on mass transit, yeah, then it just invites you to explore more of the town, and it just becomes a more tactile experience. I don't know.
No, yeah, no, I agree there. But other than that, the thing that's been occupying my mind, I've been trying to keep my mind off it a little bit, trying to remember to keep myself sane and be able to kind of, retain my my sense of self. But I have been, as I'm sure you have been, copiously reading and engaging with the current situation in Israel. Um, I've been pretty disappointed with like almost every single person that I previously kind of held on a lot of different political spectrums. Uh, just really, just unbelievable, unfathomable things being said. Things being believed. Which I looking back, just thinking back on our last discussion, I felt I was very reserved in comparison, and I think in retrospect, I don't know. What's your thoughts? What's your thoughts?
Yeah. I I guess there are some people who have disappointed me. I haven't like kept up with so much commentary. It's more like news articles that I've read. So I haven't had too much experience with that. Um, there's one area I think we're gonna actually with the second video that we have lined up. I think we'll actually get there. But I have been watching TYT, and uh like they have one commentator there which I found very disappointing. Um, but I guess maybe we'll get to that later on. But mostly it's just been utterly tragic. Watching the deaths come in, and uh, you know, well, we had the reverie last Monday, and after our conversation, and some of the things that people were saying was like, yeah, we should have like a trail of tears for Palestinians. That there should be that mass evacuation. This is before it came down. A mass evacuation of Gaza, and then basically hammer it, and then uh, hope that the Israelis allow the Palestinians back into Gaza afterwards. Right? Like that was a solution. Seriously, it was put out by one of our participants.
I saw a very popular one that was put forward by, I believe, the Israeli government, might have been the U.S. government, was to set up a tent city in the Sinai, And I was talking to my friend the other day, and I said, "Man, it's like there's that meme that's Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen. It says like 20,000 years BC, a tyrant kicks an oppressed minority out of Gaza and forces them to wander the deserts of the Sinai. 2,000 years forward, a tyrant in Palestine in Jerusalem forces an oppressed minority to wander. It is quite biblical in the level of irony. On top of that, I don't know if you saw, but the Israeli invasion was postponed by a historic flood. Tel Aviv and Jerusalem is flooding. Again, I'm somewhat of an atheistic man, but there's a great irony to some of the ways that some of these things play out.
I had heard that it was being postponed, but I hadn't heard the reason. That is amazing. I hope no one gets hurt, of course, in Tel Aviv. But it's that is
Have
the
you
irony.
a couple little things that just have been occupying my mind? I don't know. Maybe I'm preaching to the choir. Have you heard the news about the Marine Expeditionary Unit? Do you know about this?
No.
Okay. So the last time that America put actual troops in Israel was in the 1980s. We went during the Israel invaded Lebanon, the country right above them, to try to stop the ability for the PLO and to do attacks against Israel from Lebanon. Right. When that happened, America sent some troops, and we honestly it was very quite uneventful. The most eventful thing was this was the first big attack. The first big attack on the U.S. by Hezbollah happened, where Hezbollah blew up a Marine army barracks and killed about 200 Marines. But overall, it was a very bloodless intervention for America, turned into a very long occupation for Israel. The reason I bring this up was this event was preceded by something called the Marine Expeditionary Unit being sent. The Marine Expeditionary Unit is I don't know what the exact term is, division, I guess, of about 2,000 troops that are like the tip of the tip of the tip of the spear. They get sent into places before there is a larger American military presence brought in to assist and to sort of set up, whatever kind of, various military things you need to set up. We sent one of them over in 1982, and we ended up, coming in and having actual troops on the ground in the area helping Israel. We have sent two of them. We've sent two of them now to the Middle East. I do not believe, I don't believe that necessarily means, I don't think Biden's looking to have a ground invasion or to have ground troops in Gaza or in Lebanon or in any of these countries. But I think it is extremely worrying about the temperament with which is being used. Just today, Biden referred to this event as being comparable to the Holocaust. The level of violence done against Jews is being comparable to the Holocaust. Again, you're setting up the moral. That's putting, in my opinion, that's something. If that is the way we are addressing this, then Israel has the right to annex the Gaza and the West Bank and just completely do it. I mean, like again, like if that was what was actually, if that was the left, I could rant forever. But it's it's the level with which people's sorry for ranting, but like I'm sure you saw the thing about the murdered babies, and people were kind of trying to do this very disgusting sort of flip flop of first it's incredible moral indignation of it happening, and then it was, oh really, you're asking for proof, oh you want evidence, what's the difference between a murdered baby and a desecrated blah blah. And you realize, well, I would argue what's important is that the right-wing fascist regime, which many of these people agree, many of these left-wing people that are kind of doing cover for Israel, they agree that Likud is a fascist. It is providing the moral foundations with which this regime is going to use to ethnically cleanse Gaza. When it's these lies, it's these completely unproven and unsubstantiated claims about extreme atrocities. Those are the things that are, it's these extreme moral comparisons, comparing this attack to the entirety of the Holocaust. These kind of things lays the moral foundation with which, as you saw on that panel, people were literally speaking about the Gazans is the way that we spoke about the Paiute Indians. There was a group of Indians in North California. It's called the Snake War. They did not call themselves the Snakes. They had their own language names for themselves. Settlers literally, it was completely made legal in California to kill snakes. There's no law whatsoever from killing them. That is the way with which people speak of Gazans. They speak of them as this is a foregone conclusion. They speak of them in this almost just like Old Testament terms. You know what I mean? Of talking about like, oh well, just collective punishment. It's we look back on Iraq and Afghanistan, and we see the way that that kind of thought was used to get us into two 20-year long engagements. And we see the folly in that, but then it's like it just happens again, and we just our brains like instantly default back to to believing the stories that we know are not true. And
Yeah.
somebody says nobody is ethnically cleansed. Again, like this is what's so amazing. Like there's a certain portion of the world that unless there's not a document that's signed by the Prime Minister of Israel and the head of the army and America that says we are going to ethnically cleanse, and they underline it twice. They're like, well, listen, we can have well, that's true. There are people in yes, I will agree. There are people in the IDF that want to ethnically cleanse them, that think that they're dogs and animals, that think that the entirety of the Gaza population. I agree. The people with the bombs and the guns, the guys that make the decision, they think that. But there's like left wing parties in the Knesset that have no power. They don't think that. So is it really fair to say Israel? It's like the most deranged. I don't know. It's interesting. It's a curious way of looking at this.
Yeah. Um like Israel has is forcing the evacuation within, well, previously a 24-hour period, but um of northern Gaza, right? 1.1 million people or so forced to leave their homes, or else you will be bombed to smithereens, and trapped within uh, this walled prison, um, and they are going to level their entire their homes. They're denying them food, water, fuel, everything needed to live, right? But Roby, you need to understand, I don't see any ethnic cleansing. No one made a press statement that what's happening is an ethnic cleansing. It can't be sure.
During the 1948, the event that the Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, where various right wing, some of them are left wing, I guess, but Zionist militias kicked Palestinians out of their homes and forced about 700,000 Palestinians out of the home, creating the Palestinian refugee process. Again, they didn't just go in with tanks and guns. Do you want to know what they did? They did the exact same thing that they are doing now. They would tell different villages that they need to evacuate the village because they were coming in to kill extremists. They were coming in to kill these right wing or these anti-Semitic Arab extremists. That they needed to come in, and they made the same justification. Well, anybody that didn't want to leave the village, well, hold on a second. If we tell you 2 days, we give you 2 days to leave your village and leave your town, and we say we're going to come in. Again, that's the justification that's been made since the fucking dawn of time, bro. That's literally the justifications made since the dawn of time. You know what I mean? The Romans did this, did the same tactic when they invaded Gaul, when they invaded Rome. They would surround Gallic cities, and Caesar would they would starve them, and they would allow them a certain amount of time to cross the river. And if you didn't get across the river, they would stop the river crossing, and anybody left in the city was fair game for the centurions to kill. That was again, like it's going back to Rome. I'm not trying to make a claim that this is like a unique thing that Israel's doing. America did this as a thing. America did this to Native Americans, but it's vile to see this again. Like it's not, well, temporarily leave your home. Temporarily leave your home. Let me destroy it, destroy your whole city, and level it, and then you guys can come back and live in the rug. You guys can come back and live in a tent city in the wreckage, the wreckage, or you guys can live in the Sinai Desert.
It's amazing, and last week again during the reverie, we had Scott talking about how kind Israel is. That Israel has used the least amount of violence in its creation than all other states. I mean, it mostly outsourced all of that violence to Britain to make this happen. Uh, it has simply had a shorter time frame, right? In its own existence, but this is used as some sort of like I don't know, it shows the uh how kind the Israeli state has been, right? Like it could have been worse though, right? Because it hasn't been maximally awful, then we can give grace to the Israelis, right? Like people would give grace to Americans, right? Like we didn't necessarily try to wipe out the Afghanis, or the Iraqis. Like we may have killed hundreds of thousands, caused the expulsion of 1 million. But we didn't try to kill them. It wasn't maximally violent. And so, are we really that? Are we? How could you call us the bad guy? Right? And that'll stand as long as like Gaza isn't glassed, right? Then they'll say, but it could have been worse.
Yeah, I don't know. It's you. You see, you see that exact same line of argument that I was just noticing. You see that with a lot of the times discussions about like the situation of various oppressed minorities in like modern liberal societies, whether like black people, gay people, whatever, women. It's like, well, it could be so much worse. We couldn't have had these things, so why are we complaining? It's just,
Yeah.
it's I don't know. It's such an insane, unbelievable way of looking at things.
Uh,
Yeah, I don't
uh,
know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please go.
but well, before we get started, my good friend Doobie sent me an article. This is from 2016, but this is talks about what we're on here. About half of Israeli Jews want to expel Arabs. Survey finds. Nearly half of Israeli Jews believe Arabs should be expelled or transferred from Israel, according to a survey on the political views of Jewish, religious, and secular communities. The poll released on Tuesday by Washington-based Pew Research Center, a nonpartisan think tank, also found that many Israelis, Jews, and Arabs um, appear to have lost hope for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. 48% of Israeli Jews said they agreed with the statement that Arabs should be expelled or transferred from Israel, where they make up 90% of the population of 8.4 million, while 54 to 71% of Jews uh, who define themselves as ultra orthodox, oh boy, religious or traditional, supported such a step. Only about 36% of the secular community did. President Reuven Rivlin, I don't know who that is, called the findings a wake up call for the Israeli society. The survey also addressed the role of religion in a modern day democracy founded as a Jewish state, exposing wide gaps between Orthodox and non religious Jewish respondents. According to a poll, 89% of Israeli secular Jews want demographic principles to outweigh Jewish ritual law when the two clash. An identical percentage of ultra Orthodox Jews take the opposite view. In addition, about 8 in 10 Arabs complained of heavy discrimination in Israeli society against Muslims, the largest religious minority, while 79% of Jews questioned said Jewish citizens deserve preferential treatment. It pains me to see the gap that exists in the public's consciousness, religious and secular, between the notion of Israel as a Jewish state and as a democratic state. Rivlin said in a statement after receiving the report, a further problem is the attitude towards Israel's Arab citizens. In the poll, 9% of Jews identified themselves as ultra Orthodox, 13% is religious, 29% is traditional, and 49% is secular. It found devout Jews largely lean to the right politically, while secular Jews mainly see themselves as centrist, which I think in itself is a problem. That there,
If it's a problem in fucking America, it's a problem when you're literally in the middle of like an occupied hostile population. Like, yeah, it's a big fucking problem to be a centrist. It's unbelievable.
yeah. Among the many divides on social and religious issues, the vast majority of ultra Orthodox and religious Jews supported a long-standing shutdown of most public transportation on the Jewish Sabbath, while 94% of secular Jews took the opposite view. Okay, these aren't. All right, it's almost done. Most secular Jews saw themselves as Israelis first, while 91% of ultra Orthodox or 80% of religious Jews in general saw that they were Jews first. About 40% of Israeli Jews believe a way can be found for Israel to coexist with a future Palestine, while a similar percentage believe that it is not possible, according to the poll. Among the Arab population, about half saw such a coexistence as possible, compared to 74% in 2013. Israeli-Palestine peace talks collapsed in 2014, just before the 7-week war between Israel, Palestine, and armed groups in Gaza. What is surprise? Okay, yeah. So,
Rivlin was the president of Israel for from 2014 to 2021. He's also from the Likud party. So this is
okay,
like a right wing Israeli being like, okay, guys, this is too much. He's being like, hey, guys, pull
Yeah.
back, let's chill, calm down. Okay, we're a democracy, we have to give them rights. So it's like,
I
yeah.
forgot that Israel has a prime minister and a president. I
Mhm.
always forget when countries do that.
But also, it's
But
like it's very interesting to think about some of the. So, like, let's go down a little bit to the kind of the bottom of this.
oh,
Or
okay.
oh, that's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, because down there, just like the peace talks I was talking about there.
Uh-huh.
The before the war in 2014. That's referring to Operation Cast Lead, where I believe at least 1,000 Palestinian civilians died. Where Israel used white phosphorus on on civilians, and where the Israeli Defense Department described their own actions as "this time we went too far." That's quoting Norman Finkelstein in his book on the subject. Excuse me. So just again, that's the punishment the people of Gaza get when talks fall through the strongmen religious fundamentalists that were elected in 2007 and have not been voted on since, a population that is half children. When the peace talks fall through, rockets are indiscriminately, or they would say that, they would say they're discriminating, but obviously there's we can get into that, but it's just that's something that's the two things I think I keep in to kind of frame this is that's like number one, this is a right wing Israeli president talking. This is not a left wing crackpot, right? And not to disrespect left wing crackpots. They have their place in society, but this is a right wing guy. And on top of that, after the last time they had a peace talks, when that fell through, that was the treatment that the Palestinians got. And then when the Palestinians tried a non-violent approach, the March of Return, which happened in 2019, I believe it was a UN report, either a UN report or a Human Rights Watch report, came out and said that the Israeli government targeted limbs in the elderly. There was a medic who was killed. A 19-year-old a woman, a medic, was killed,
Oh,
shot by a sniper. There were children shot by snipers because they
yeah.
were coming up and throwing rocks at a fence.
Um, 1 second, because I need to acknowledge my friend, Doobie again. Doobie, thank you for giving a $20 hype chat, or super chat. He says, thanks for giving me someone reasonable to listen to while I shop. So I hope you're having a good one, Doobie. Thank you so much for the support. Really kind of you, friend, to do that, for the community. But but yeah, thank you for that. All right, so let's get started with like what we had. Actually, before we get started with exactly what we were going to discuss previously, I'd like to talk about like where this is all like heading. Um, because I was watching a video about uh um like breaking news that happened earlier today about like Hezbollah, because when we had this conversation last week, we were saying that Hezbollah wouldn't really step in. That seems to be changing, right? We've heard, Lebanon wouldn't be able to support that. They wouldn't have the economy, the means to put up an effective fight. And well, it may be effective, but they are fighting. So there is cross-border fighting happening between the Israelis and the Lebanese, or at least Hezbollah. I'm not sure what the relationship with that in the state is, so I don't know.
Um, between Hezbollah and what?
Lebanon?
Oh, Hezbollah is like a non-state organization. There's a political wing but Hezbollah they're like the military wing. They're separate. They take the idea being is that I was reading a paper about this. The idea being that the official like elected political council more or less gives like they decide on the tenets of the party and they give that to what's called the Jihad Council, and the Jihad and the Shura, they decide what it's like that's all secret, and they do all the secret shit. So they're non-state. They're the biggest non-state army, I actually believe.
Yeah. Um. Okay. Fair enough. The biggest Nazi army in the world. Is that what you said?
I believe that is. I think I'm pretty sure I'm 100% confident they're within the top five. They're like
Okay.
they're like one of the biggest examples if you wanted to look at like a non-state army.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Well, we didn't think they had a level of support, like infrastructure support, economic support to be able to launch. It seems like they're raring to go. I don't know the internal politics of the Lebanese, obviously. And of Hezbollah, so it's unclear to me how likely that is. But beyond that, Iran has made a statement that like they don't want this war to escalate, but if it does, they will intervene. And if Iran does, then there's every reason to believe that the U.S. gets drawn in the conflict. And so that those Marine Expedition Force that you were talking about previously, they'll have their hands full. There we have two aircraft carriers, I think, right? Yeah, two aircraft carriers sitting um, close to the situation, which is like an unprecedented amount of force. In like recent decades to launch there. So we're ready to go. The Iranians are ready to go. This war can spread. This war can escalate severely, sharply, and suddenly. And who knows what other actors within the Middle East might get involved. This is
Something that has not got brought up that I think is very, very important, very interesting. Did you know this is? I can't even believe this is not being talked about more on news. Did you know that Israel has put the Aleppo airport out of service? They bombed the Aleppo airport as retaliation for what I guess they allege Syrian support of attack of some kind.
Yeah,
They
I
have
heard that.
that is a act of war. I can't even. I but again, like if you asked me if like to write a Tom Clancy novel, and you said, okay, take these two random countries and make them go to war. Okay, well, what if you bombed one of them, your international airport? Again, like that's just like top five places you're going to want to. But again, what the point I bring this up is Syria has done nothing to respond, and I think that that is a pretty an interesting. Syria is in a very weak spot right now. From Assad is very deeply trying to end the civil war, trying to solidify control of the country, and I think that perhaps I could be unsurprised if there's not a war weariness in Syria that is maybe not so present in Lebanon. And one of the reasons why I say that, even though Lebanon has suffered an extraordinary amount of economic collapse, as we see with obviously the Weimar example, many times economic collapse leads to religious extremism. But the big thing is the last time that Israel and Hamas had a full-on capital W war, or sorry, not Hamas, Israel and Hezbollah had a full-on war in 2006. This is referred to by Hezbollah as the divine victory because they won. The Israelis had to run away so quickly. They had to retreat so quickly from their positions in Lebanon that there is a whole museum, an outdoor exhibit that that Hezbollah has of captured pristine Israeli technology, tanks, vehicles, armor, and you can go and you can walk, and it's in an olive grove. And they are open about this. They show this to the Israelis. That is the last. That is the severity with which the IDF was routed by Hezbollah. And again, the other side of this, Hamas comparatively is like a gang. Comparatively, it's a gang. It's like a bunch of people in a prison that come together to fight against the wardens, more or less. Versus Hezbollah, which is again one of the top 5 non-state armies in the world. So there's a reason for the Israelis to not want it to break out.
Interesting. Interesting. See, now I didn't know that. That's damn it, I love talking to you, Kobe. I really love talking to you. Um that's that's fantastic context to have that I did not have before. Thank you for expanding this. Israel had moved troops to the Lebanese border, and a whole lot of them. And having that context, realized like how like they looked at it as much more of a threat than I did, and for very good reason. If they lost that badly last time. Um, of course, times are different. I don't know what the shape of the economy of Lebanon was at the time. I don't know, you know, in what condition Hezbollah is now. Not that like I would be rooting for Hezbollah or anything. Like there's bad guys all around. Like I want to make sure that it's said that there's like bad guys all around. There's like I'm not a hero I'm cheering for. But and I want de-escalation, right? I want this to end as soon as possible with as few deaths as possible and as equitable of a manner as we can possibly have in such a terrible situation. Um, so that's my hope, right? But understanding how this can go, like look, it might look in a month, 2 months from now, like it's very well possible American troops could be involved. very much possible. That is the case. And like we have people, and it's interesting looking at our political context. We have like Lindsey Graham, right? You've heard his statements, Lindsey Graham, uh, Warhawk of Warhawks. This dude, like, as a politician, as a human being, right? One of the most pathetic words I've ever been exposed to. Like, can we agree on this? That Lindsey Graham is just a pathetic worm, a bootlicker, right? A looking for the nearest strongman, like, and actively so, and admittedly so, looking for the person, who gives them the most political advantage, and then kissing up to them, whoever that happens to be, even if they humiliated them previously, like Donald Trump had done, right? And Lindsey Graham pretended he was a big, strong man, big boy, and he wasn't going to take any of that from Donald Trump until it became clear that the political winds had shifted, and then he went crawling to him. Please, Donald Trump. Oh God, I apologize for ever saying a bad word to you. I will be your chief whipping boy. I will sing your praises to high heaven. This is the type of person he is. And this person who has never known a war, right? Never known a conflict that he didn't like, that he didn't want to encourage. And he, for years and years, have been pushing for a war of Iran. And now, like, it's closer than ever. We're closer than ever to a war of Iran. And this man is overjoyed with that, right? Doing everything he can just by as a U.S. politician, like antagonizing Iran, right? Safely in Washington D.C., of course, because this man would never pick up a weapon, right? The U.S. gets invaded. He's the first one to surrender and say, I will assist you in conquering this nation, our new overlords, right? So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm just like ranting about how much I hate this man. Yeah.
I personally, like, I'm currently reading a biography of Kissinger. I have a lot of debates with my mom about. I personally believe that, like, she's a little more partisan left wing than I am, and I personally believe that people like, for example, Mitch McConnell. I think they're a lot more shrewd politicians. Even if I disagree with them morally, like they play the game. I wish I played the game as well as they did.
Yeah.
Again, Lindsey Graham, literally, I'm not trying to be homophobic. I think Lindsey Graham has blackmail on him, that he's gay. And I think that he has to do whatever the Republicans want. I unironically believe that's a big rumor that's been in Washington for like a really long time with Lindsey Graham, that he has blackmail on him. And I know, I'm sorry, I'm being a bad here, but it's like he is so fucking spineless. It is so unbelievable. It is like uncomparable to other fucking people in the GOP. But maybe that's just me and my anti-Republican bias.
No, I don't know if there's any blackmail, but what blackmail material could be? Everyone know he's gay, right? Like Republicans.
Yeah, it would just be they would like come out and ruin his career, like admit it.
But like I don't know, like, well, okay, so he's from like South Carolina, right? Like, it seems to me that the only way this would ruin his career is the way in which like evangelical parents like pretend like they don't see that their kid is gay, right? Like everyone else around them sees it, but they just deny, and then like, if there was evidence, right, like video evidence in front of them, all of a sudden they're shocked and chagrined, and we're like, dude, like this dude has in his room, it's like covered with like pictures of like half like shirtless boy bands, right? But like you didn't know. Okay, buddy, right? Like, so that's, I guess maybe that could ruin his career, but for the most part, we all get it. Like, fuck. And I don't know. It just, I don't, I like with Lindsey Graham. This is honestly just a deeply held belief that in American muscular foreign policy, and drawing us into the most costly war where his defense contract buddies make the most money. Like, I just don't see any political like thread, I guess, right? Cohesive thread that makes any more sense than that. That he simply likes America like going to war and against anyone that could be even slightly considered an average, like China. He wants to go to war with China, right? Like the devastation, the loss of life, literally mean nothing to him. Like whether I don't know. I will just leave it there because I will go on for hours. Sorry, but anyway, this is just like the point of the reason I'm bringing this up is that we see how on both sides like both sides of the war, on both sides of an aisle within a country, within a political, within the political spectrum of a country, that we have people who are instigators, right? Who are leading us down the path to more conflict. And how this plays out on the international stage, right? Like, so we have people like Lindsey Graham, but we have people in Israel who are like this. We have people in Palestine who are like this, who are trying to instigate a conflict. It seems like Hamas, like this might have been the overall goal for Hamas, maybe that we start this war that we can't possibly win, right? Like you said, I think you said you put it really well, Toby, that they're just a gang comparatively that runs the prison camp, which is Gaza, and so they couldn't have possibly won this. However, they know the response from Israelis is going to be overblown, right? Like so, like they slaughter civilians on that side. They'll so they get the Israelis, go with them to slaughter civilians on this side, and that enrages the Lebanese. And then the Iranians say that look, we don't want to get involved in this, and so we'll have to, which will draw in the Americans. And so now, from a stalemate posture, where well, not even a stalemate, like a winning posture for the Israelis over the Palestinians. From that, where that could have just lasted for decades more. Now we have international attention, like nations around the world paying attention to this conflict. The plight of Palestinians is on the lips of everyone, whether they're for them or against them. It's on the lips of everyone, and there will be a new status quo afterwards, right? If we are drawn to this conflict, there'll be a new status quo afterwards, whether for good or for bad. But they decided we're gonna roll the dice here, and hope that after the incredible amount of deaths, right, from a multi-front war, that we'll be better off. That's their play, and that's how desperate they are.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree with that. I think it's instigated again. The extraordinarily childish, almost like a Tom Clancy novel description of Hamas that even many educated and left wing commentators in the West have described their attack of they're just savagely attacking the Israelis out of bloodlust is ridiculous. The Palestinians, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia was very openly telegraphing that they were going to abandon the Palestinians. They were no longer going to care about the Palestinian issue, and the normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel was signing that deal. There was the fate of Gazans was sealed. They were going to live in the exact same situation they were living in a year ago or 6 months ago when this talks were still happening, and nothing was going to change. And the Hamas leadership decided they were going to instigate a war and try to do that to force the issue because they felt as if, and this is the thought of any group that uses violence to try to get their means across. They believe that their violence, no matter how vile it is, and I think that in the looks of the operation, it really does look like a gang broke out into Israel and gang kind of behavior happened, kidnappings, assaults, just death of civilians, which I think that needs to be Hamas should really come out and do sort of international My Lai style trials about that. But regardless, this was not uncalculated. This was a thoughtful attack. They were doing this because they needed to force the issue, force the debate, because they thought that they were going to win. They think they'll win. They think that if you look and you compare everything that happened with that attack, and you look at the last 20 years of history, and you look at everything that Israel has done, that they think that most people in the world will not side with Israel. And I think that obviously that's still good. That's still out unfolding. We're still in the middle of that. We're still seeing how that happens.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I really want. The last thing, I sent you a link. Could you pop that link on page on the screen real quick?
Sure, no problem.
A lot of the times we talk about a war with Iran, and I think that we think about it as being a war with Iraq, where it's just going to be this sort of podunked desert nation where we come in and there's the leader that gets deposed instantaneously. Iran is a post-revolutionary society. They have a deeply, deeply held sense of of nationalism, and a deeply held sense of holding on. And again, like, they're revolutionaries. It's similar to revolutionaries in Russia, where love of the revolution, love of the nation was emboldened by the Nazi invasion. This is the Wikipedia page. And during the 1980s, Iran and Iraq went to war, and during that war, Iran used child soldiers pretty frequently in certain cases. And this is an example of the radicalism and the viewpoint with which many within the Iranian, it's called the Pasdaran. It's like the religious part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is not the Iranian military. They're their own organization that's outside of the military that was created during the revolution. And they're supposed to be there to uphold the revolution. They basically are there to coup the government if the government gets too reformist. They technically have elections in Iran, but there's a reason why the election, well, why there's not a lot of dissent amongst those electors, is because the IRGC will openly say they're going to coup the president, and will reinstate the revolution if things get off course. During the war, during the use of child soldiers, they gave young children keys. They called them plastic keys to paradise, and told them that if they died when they were defusing bombs and were assisting the military, that they would use the key to unlock the door to paradise. If America engages in a war with the Iranian population will view it as an apocalyptic war against their nation and against the soul of their country. It will be indescribable. It will be equivalent to the Nazi invasion of Russia, in that it destroyed the Nazi, and it was the Nazi empire, and caused the destruction of the Nazi the Nazi war front. In the same way, I think that it would completely be an unbelievable tragedy for the American population, not to mention the population of Iran, which would suffer from both their government and suffer from our own government. And I think that far too much the American colonial hubris is to think, well, Iran, Iraq, they're one letter off. They're right next to each other. It's going to be the same, won't it? 2004 2004 Iraq was a very different place than 2023 Iran. 2023 Iran, whether we like it or not, it's a modern country. Not maybe morally, maybe not legally, but like technologically, they're a modern country. Iraq was not. Iraq was a failed state when we invaded them. And I don't know. I wanted to bolster what you were saying here. The people, I understand some people that want to invade. For example, want to increase support for Ukraine. I think Ukraine are fighting a just cause. I understand people who wanted to deal with the Taliban, or deal with Al Qaeda, or deal with ISIS. But the idea that we're going to go and unseat get rid of the Iranian revolution in Iran is just the most insane, unbelievable. It's something that only a politician could believe. It's somebody who's paid by these kind of, the military industrial complex could believe.
But Kobe, I don't think you understand this conflict very well. Have you ever considered that both Iran and Iraq share 3 out of the 4 letters in their name? So they seem pretty
I
similar
didn't
to
even
me.
think of it. That is very
too.
true. That is very
Yeah.
true. They're both brown. They're both
Yeah.
they're both Muslims, and neither of them like us. They don't like burger. They don't like SpongeBob. They don't like Spider-Man. So
Even literally the geography of the country is detrimental. There's a reason why they're still a country at this point in time. Their mountainous regions, and their entrenched defenses have something to say about that. But people like Lindsey Graham would have no problem sending American troops there, because he knows that he'll never be touched. That he can provocate safely from Washington D.C., right, from his penthouse with his allegedly cabana boys there. He can do all that and never suffer any consequences. And you have people like this from both sides. I gotta say, this plastic key to paradise thing that you're talking about, holy crap! This reminds me of some interesting stories I heard of, and yeah, this is a way to mobilize people to die pointlessly for a cause. It's a good way to get children to end their lives, and end the lives of others who otherwise they'd be friends with. So, wow.
yeah, but
Okay.
I think we should probably watch the videos that we came here to watch. Why do you get this set up? I'm listening. I just need to grab a glass of water really quick here.
Okay. All right. So we are going to what are we gonna do? We're going to watch this video with Piers Morgan. Um, he is going to actually I don't know. This is a video that our friend Kobe found. But Piers Morgan debates Palestinian Mustafa Barghouti over conflict. And so they're gonna have a fight, and that'll be fun. And well, I guess I'll keep going. Let's just get started. Yeah, here we go.
For more, I'm joined from Ramallah in the West Bank by the Palestinian Initiative leader, Mustafa Barghouti. Mr. Barghouti, thank you for joining me. It's very hard when you look at the scale of what has happened here not to believe that this is a reprehensible terrorist attack by a bunch of medieval barbarians. When I say that, what is your response?
First of all, let me say that I'm really sorry about what happened to Deborah's family. I'm glad they are safe. If I can contribute to relieving their suffering, I am ready to do so. That's one side of the issue. But what I would like you to know, and I want the audience to know, is that what they described is exactly what happened to many Palestinian families only 3 months ago, when Israeli illegal settlers attacked their houses and burned them. These were American Palestinians from the village of Tormusaiya and Sinjil and Huwara. And they almost faced the same story. Their houses burned, their cars burned by fanatic Israeli illegal settlers. In this situation, I'm a medical doctor, as you know, and I learned that the best treatment of a patient is not only to look at the symptoms, but at the causes of the problem. And while we are talking, Gaza now is under bombardment. Gaza is taken, actually, Netanyahu is taking Gaza, the whole of Gaza, 2.2 million people as a hostage, cutting water, cutting electricity, cutting medicines, cutting food from them. The acts of collective punishment against 2.2 million Palestinians is not the right response. And this will lead to more problems. But the cause problem of what we see here is 56 years of military Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. The fact that Netanyahu blocked every possibility for a peaceful resolution of this conflict, he blocked Oslo agreement, he fought against it, he aggravated people against Yitzhak Rabin, who was assassinated after signing Oslo agreement. And the result is what we see today, a protracted problem. The only way out of this situation so that no Palestinian or Israeli would suffer is to end the Israeli illegal occupation, end the system of apartheid. And I'm not saying that by my own words. These are the words of Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, and even the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, end the system of apartheid that Palestinians are subjected to.
You know, I watched you, if I may just jump in there, I watched you do an interview with an old colleague of mine, Fareed Zakari at CNN. And you said many similar things, and it was a thoughtful interview. It was conducted respectfully. But you said one thing there which I wanted to challenge you on now, which is you said that in these attacks, Hamas did not target civilians. I mean, that is clearly completely untrue. They deliberately targeted civilians. Would you like to retract that statement?
No, I said that Hamas started by attacking military stations. And obviously, there were attacks on civilians, which we don't accept and we don't agree with, as much as we don't agree now with what the Israeli airstrikes are doing to Gaza, striking civilian population, killing so far 700 people. And I am sure by tomorrow morning, it will be 2,000 people killed.
But just to clarify, Mr. Barghouti, just to clarify, you do now accept they were targeting civilians, because you didn't accept that on CNN.
No, I said I didn't have the full information. I know now that some civilians were killed, and this is unacceptable.
I mean, it's not just some civilians. I mean, 260 mainly young people. Well, let me just say something. 260 mainly young people attending a peaceful music festival were machine gunned to their death by terrorists flying in, paragliding in with machine guns. I mean, it is hard to
So I don't know what like it feels like Pierce Morgan is just trying to antagonize the guest because the guest keeps saying, "No, yeah, these deaths shouldn't have happened. They were horrible. I don't agree with them." And then he's like, "But yeah, but there was a lot of deaths there, right? Like I don't like what else is there but like I'm just antagonizing this guest. Maybe he's like I expected him to be more belligerent, and so I need him to fight me on something, or this will be this segment will be lame. I don't know. Um,
Just for some reference here, this guy that's talking, Barghouti, is a member of the PLO, which is the secular, based in the West Bank, non-Hamas sort of side of the Palestinian representation. They're the ones that are currently like the most powerful group within the Palestinian Authority, PA, which is the governing body of the West Bank. They're against Hamas. PLO and Hamas have fought civil wars before. They've killed each other. Hamas would say PLO are traitors who are selling out their people to live in Bantustans under Israel. It demonstrates Piers Morgan is a world famous television producer. He should be intelligent enough to know that this guy who is on the central committee of an organization that other organization wants to kill him. If Hamas would kill this guy, if they could, they would kill. He's on the central committee of their biggest rival. Why would they not? I can't even believe. And you're asking, well, yeah. He agrees with you. He thinks they're too far. He's part of the PLO. He would be in other groups if he was a radical extremist. It is a symptom of the presupposition of collective punishment on the behalf of the Palestinian people. That any element of any group that claims authority over them, any action they do is then collectively, well, unless you sit there and give again, I think as you're saying here, there's nothing that he could say other than just, okay, actually, you're right, Piers Morgan, you're right. Invade Gaza. Take him out. You're right. I think you're right. This is too far. Like, that's about it.
yeah, and I think this is all about like this is part of the marginalization of the secular uh, resistance, right? That's been happening. Like literally, Netanyahu has said in the past that part of their plan is to marginalize the PLO and push groups like Hamas because they make them look good, right? Hamas will do the violent extremism, and then they can use that for justification for more violence against Palestinians, and speed up their ethnic cleansing campaign. So, well, he didn't say that much part. He didn't say that part, but like still, like that's the plan is that they were going to marginalize these secular groups, and we in the West assist them, where we like don't acknowledge that there are other groups of other opinions and other ways of doing these things. When we make it look like Hamas is like the one and only power, that there is some sort of uniformity within the Palestinian collective of support there. That like when we don't complicate these things, we flatten them out, and so Hamas becomes equal to Palestine, and so then you'll have things like in France where they're banning pro-Palestinian marches because that could be construed as supporting terrorism, right? Like this is what happens when you flatten the conversation, where you don't like add nuance or anything like that. When you don't try to expand people's understanding of a conflict, you can say something as ridiculous as the Palestinian flag is now synonymous with a terrorist attack. Did you want to say anything else? Or?
I agree with everything you said right there. No, it's an inexcusable way of looking at the conflict.
Fair enough.
To imagine a worse atrocity, do you unreservedly condemn that act of terrorism?
I do not accept killing any civilian, but would you tell me that the Israeli soldiers that have killed today 140 Palestinian children and 105 Palestinian women are also terrorists?
I think that the Israeli people are entitled to defend themselves against what happened in the last 48 hours. I'm not for a moment defending everything the Israeli government's done in the last few decades. Of course, I've always, where it's been justified, criticized what they've been doing. But on this occasion, I'm not interested in playing whataboutery with you. I'm simply asking, I'm simply asking you, do you unreservedly condemn the slaughter of 260 innocent people?
I condemn any killing of any civilian, whether Palestinian or Israeli. But you have to accept that if Israel has the right to defend itself, Palestinians also must have the same right of being able to defend
But
themselves.
nobody has a right to
Especially,
commit. Nobody has a right to commit acts
no,
of terrorism.
but
We'd agree
you
with that, right?
would you say, no, I am asking, would you say that we also have the right to defend ourselves as human beings?
I think that there has been an oppression of the Palestinian people in Gaza for way too long. I think that there needs to be a peace settlement. We finally got
Great.
there. We finally got there in Northern Ireland. But I don't understand how anybody with even half a brain would think the way to get a peace settlement is to kill nearly 1,000 mostly innocent Israelis who have nothing to do with the conflict, many of whom were attending a music festival, and get machine gunned to pieces. There is no way. There is no way that kind of attack is ever going to forge peace, is there?
Absolutely, but let's look forward. Now, at this very moment, there are hostages. There are Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. There are Israeli prisoners in Gaza. The best step forward is the following: immediate exchange of prisoners, immediate stop of all the fighting, immediate ceasefire, and opening the road for what you have said. Something like what happened in Ireland, ending the Israeli illegal occupation, allowing Palestinians finally to be free from oppression and to live side by side. I personally wouldn't mind if we could live side by side in two-state solution. But if Israel kills the two-states option, I think the only solution is that we live together in one country, in peacefully.
Can I ask you? I know you're not
in one democratic state.
Okay, I know you're not a member.
Where we both have equal rights.
Yeah.
And we both are entitled.
So this is I was thinking about this. I listened to this interview a couple days ago. This is the way that I would phrase this if I was talking to somebody who was making this argument towards me, that the attack of Hamas was inherently unexcusable because it sort of, the presupposition is that one of the goals was to kill civilians. And that therefore, anything they were doing, even if they happened to attack a valid military target along the way, the entire operation was invalid. I would just turn around and say, okay, Israel knows full well that when they drop bombs, white phosphorus, and munitions on a population of 1/2 children, they are going to kill civilians and children. If that same logic applies, that unless Israel gets a special standard of terrorism, that's a terrorist action. If we're using this standard that a terrorist action is a military action with which civilians are going to die, and you do it either way. Israel does that every single time they bomb Gaza, yet they have the justification that they have the right to defend themselves. If that runs one way, it has to run both ways. And I think that that's what he's saying here. I think that's a completely reasonable and justifiable line of argument. And I think that and obviously I'd be curious to what somebody who is a good faith defender of Israel would say to that, but that would be my response.
Yeah. I was watching Brianna Jo Gray. She was talking about who gets to use these excuses. The idea that Israel has the right to defend itself, this phrase that we've heard, well, for decades, really. But it's also specifically now in this moment, how it's a bubble back in the surface. Israel has the right to defend itself. And that, the opposite, Palestine, has the right to defend itself. It's just, completely outside of, at least American media. I can't speak for, the rest of Western media. But that phrase is simply never said, right? And that happens for multiple reasons. It happens for the fact that Israel Israel has a militarized force, right? And the force that they use is assumed to have state power behind it, legitimate power behind it. And Hamas, well, they're just a bunch of gangs. They're not a uniformed military going up against them. And so what they're doing, right? The deaths they cause, clearly that's terrorism, right? Because that's what a terrorist looks like, right? A terrorist is from an underdog group or a rogue group that commits these acts of violence against another population. But if it's done with a uniform, right? This is what the work we do for American violence, right? When it's uniformed Americans doing the violence, well, then that's legitimate violence done against an enemy. But when the other side does it to us, well, that's simply terrorism, right? So like this is like a familiar trope that we're working on. And then it's just like the idea of the oppressed versus the oppressors, right? And violence that the oppressed do in retaliation to oppressors is always illegitimate. Obviously, it becomes illegitimate because the oppressors are the ones who are in charge, right? They decide what is good or bad. Um, and so they can shape that narrative. And so this is just like what you would always expect. So it doesn't matter that Israel can unleash far more devastation and does unleash far more devastation and uses chemical weapons like white phosphorus before and now in this conflict. It's always that like that the actions of the oppressed in retaliation, that is wrong, that is terrorism, it's illegitimate.
Yes, as somebody points out in chat, a very common, this is even used by a lot of scholarly sources, that terrorism is something that is only undertaken by non-state actors. That just by the definition of what terrorism is, it can't be undertaken by a state actor. In this case scenario, then the group that is is a what is it called, blockading a 2 million person strong population is incapable definitionally of doing terrorism. Nothing they could do is terrorism. They could drop white phosphorus on a hospital and they could say, okay, well, obviously that's bad and it's unproductive. Think it's unproductive. Was this really helping peace when we, drop white phosphorus on children? But you can't call it terrorism because it's just not the case.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And the other reason that I didn't get to as to why this happens is because we don't have that complete understanding of what happens in Palestine, the complete understanding of their degradation, the humiliation, of the violence that they face. Because if we did, right, then we wouldn't assume what that the status quo like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, like we wouldn't assume that was peace, right? Like people were coming from the assumption that like I hadn't heard about this like the Israeli-Palestine thing. I hadn't heard anything. I knew there was a conflict, but I hadn't heard about it. So things were peaceful then, and then Hamas attacks, and now things are not peaceful, right? Rather than there was incredible violence against the Palestinians, both economic and religious and physical violence, right? As was described by this individual on the screen with the settlers, right? That was happening, right? Continuously happening, and then there was a spike in that violence when Hamas struck back, right? Like that's what's happening. There was a continuous violence, but that's not part of it, right? So simply before it was peaceful, and if they had kept up with the peacefulness there, right, with peaceful demonstrations, then that would have solved it.
One second. I want to try to find some. Keep playing the video. He's about to actually. There's a part that's coming up right now where he, in my opinion, I think it's a very, very good moment over on Piers Morgan. Let me look for something really quick.
To the same equal human rights. I think that's the only way out of this situation. And we cannot say. I mean, I could list to you now so many atrocities. Let me tell you one thing from my own personal experience. Once in 1996, I was treating an injured person. I was a medical person in my white coat, and an Israeli sniper saw me and shot me twice. I still carry 35 shrapnels in my back, but I don't keep talking about that. I think the way out of this is to stop all forms of violence, to stop all forms of conflict, and to allow a peaceful resolution.
But here's the thing.
And that peaceful,
Mustafa, here's the thing. Let me just
resolution.
respond to that. When I watched your interview at CNN and I hear you again tonight, you sound a reasonable man who wants a reasonable solution to this, right? I'm not going to disrespect you by saying otherwise. The problem is Hamas are not reasonable people. They're not like you. They just want to kill as many Jews as they can possibly kill. They have no interest in the kind of resolution that you're talking about. And Hamas now has a stranglehold over the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian people. As long as they have that stranglehold with their concept of how this plays out, there is no chance of the settlement you're talking about. Do you accept that?
May I respond?
Yeah.
I know Hamas people. I've negotiated with them so many times. I've debated with them many times about the value and power of nonviolent resistance. And I tell you, they are ready to accept two-state solution. They are ready to accept that. What they are not ready to accept is that we Palestinians will repeat what the PLO leadership did, recognizing Israel as a state, while Israel still refuses to recognize our right as a state. You know, one of the main problems that Netanyahu created, and I think this man will be definitely put in front of many inquiries about what happened in the last 2 days or 3 days. But one of the worst things he did was to stand up in the United Nations only 2 weeks ago, carrying the map of Israel, including annexing the occupied West Bank, annexing the occupied Gaza Strip, annexing the occupied East Jerusalem, as well as the Golan Heights, which Israeli officially annexed. This map by itself drove everybody crazy. That meant that he and his government, with people like Smotrich, who doesn't hide away calling himself a fascist homophobe, they say that we should fill the West Bank with settlers and settlements so that Palestinians would lose all hopes of a state of their own.
Okay.
And then they will have one of three choices: either to immigrate or accept a life of subjugation to the Israelis or die. Such statement by the second most important minister in the Israeli government does not lead to peace. And that's
well,
what
on that
people
point, Mr.
Yes.
Miguel, I would agree with you. I think some of the more hardline right-wing headbangers, frankly, that Netanyahu's put into his cabinet are coming out with incendiary rhetoric before this, which has been deeply unhelpful. So on that, I would agree with you.
But the problem is when he says it's deeply unhelpful, is that like it sounds like, well, this is some sort of departure, you know, departure from like the reasonableness of like the Israeli state. The Israeli state like is generally a reasonable partner here, and a reasonable actor. And the things they do, there may be there's some bad things that happen, right? But generally, it's in the realm of like legitimate. Right, and then now, we've got some people, Netanyahu, who's just put in, were unhelpful. Rather than that, the state is following a consensus, a racist consensus, by a population with racist views, right? As we discussed previously. Thank you, Doobie, for with that survey, right? Who want racist policies put in place, like ethnic cleansing policies put in place, and who are responding to that. Right? Who are responding to a citizen, to a coalition, a political coalition that is okay with all these things, and he's simply voicing that, and it makes the Western consensus uncomfortable. It certainly makes the Americans uncomfortable because, hey, like we will support you unconditionally, but like don't make us look bad. That's the reality of it all. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I just, it's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, Abu Dhabi says it in the in chat. It is unbelievable that people that that Israeli government officials that describe themselves as fascists, Israeli government officials, like an ex-prime minister that was yelling at an NBC correspondent, why are you talking about Gazan civilians right now? 1,000 Israelis just died. When these are the people that get described as headbangers who are unhelpful, yet a person who is a member of the PLO, who would be assassinated by Hamas if Hamas had control of all of Palestine, is asked time and time again to denounce the killing of civilians. And I think the really bombshell moment here, I thought, was when he made the comment about him having been shot in the chest by an Israeli sniper when he was a medic. And that is just, it is indescribable, the amount that every single Palestinian has a personal story like that, of some kind of violence being done onto them, or violence being done onto someone that is a direct descendant of them, their families in some way, that they have to put aside. And they have to sit, and they don't use that. A vast majority of Palestinians are not Hamas. A vast majority of Palestinians are fucking children, and they have to put that aside when they engage in negotiations. They have to put that aside every single time that they engage, in this discussion in a way that I don't know. Israel tries to get us to support them. by pointing out that they are a Western-style democracy, that they have freedom of speech and freedom of elections. And yet these are the leaders they're choosing. In 1995, Itzhak Rabin, who was the prime minister that was trying to get and got closest to a peace agreement with the Palestinians, was assassinated by a man who was a member of Likud. Benjamin Netanyahu, this is something that I learned from the very good streamer Lonerbox. Benjamin Netanyahu led protests where he held coffins, or where his supporters held coffins that were supposed to be mock coffins for Itzhak Rabin before he died, because they were saying, he's such a horrible president. He needs to, this needs to happen to him because he's going to make peace with the Palestinians. It's I don't know. It's the bias is unbelievable.
And so this is part of the problem, is that like this is so much of this is opaque to an outside Western audience, and Netanyahu and Likud, they understand this. They understand that we don't like truly get the history, and that American media is a co-conspirator with them to make sure that this history doesn't come out. That we don't get this context, right? The Americans can't make an informed decision about this, right? Like you can look at all of this and still say, well, like because Israel, because of the indignities that Jews have suffered for centuries, that Israel, their priorities have some sort of primacy within this conflict, right? You can look at the entirety of that and have some sort of reasonable conclusion there, right? And say maybe, well, I don't like the violence of the Israeli government, but like I think the project of Israel is just so important because of those reasons. But we can't have those honest conversations, right? We're still stuck on like, why don't they use peaceful negotiations, right? Why don't they just use peaceful protests? Because they're dealing with a fascist party, right? On the Israeli side, they're dealing with a fascist party that wants that is for the ethnic cleansing campaign, that wants to make the two-state solution absolutely impossible. This is what they're dealing with, that all these avenues have been closed off. And so when you do that, you disempower the moderates on the other side, right? When the people look at them and see they're impotent, that when they try to reach out and have these peaceful negotiations and they're completely rebuffed, right? Like, why would you as a populist like just keep voting them back in when clearly nothing changes? Clearly, the violence continues on in your life. That only strengthens extremists when you do that. But we don't get that context. It's just that, like, there go the Palestinians. The only time we ever hear about them is when they're doing violence against the Israelis, right? So there must be something wrong with them, right? Like, so,
No, I think you need to either have no brain or no heart to not be able to understand, as you just said, why there are many Jewish people feel as if they need to have Israel, they need to have a state, they need to have a strong sense of cultural identity. The Holocaust was 1 generation ago. There are alive Holocaust survivors that today give every day. They go at the Holocaust Museum in Washington and they give tours and they talk about what happened to them. This is a living memory. I think that we all kind of, this is something that I think is important to remember. But the thing is, you have to apply that to the Palestinians. They got their land dispossessed under a decade later. They were subject to horrible treatment within a decade. They have been subjected to 75 years. There's a very famous left-wing novel about the subject called 100 Years War on Palestine. And that is the feeling that many Palestinians have. Before we move on to the next, I would like to watch the Young Turks video. I thought it was very, very interesting. I would like to just very, very quickly, I'll post this. I don't think we need to read this one fully. I'll post this in the chat. I'll send this to you. This is just an interesting little article. And I think it goes to the way that a lot of the times these settler colonial conflicts are discussed. I remember on the last podcast we had, I took a really big issue with the description of it as an invasion of Hamas into Israel. And in retrospect, I kind of understand that now. It is true this is the first time this has happened. This is the first time that specifically Hamas has broken into Israel. So I recognize that, why that is. But I thought about it a little bit more, and I think the frustration I had with that phrasing, I think I realized it. There are many massacres that happened of Native American peoples, but all of them follow a very, very similar pattern. I put an article in the chat that talks about a specific one. In the 1860s, in the 1850s, Nevada was being settled by American prospectors looking for mines, and a mine town was set up. And what would almost every single time happen in the instance of Thatcher Pass, which is what I posted, a group of white settlers abducted and raped and killed a Numu girl, and a tribe of Numu men came and enacted revenge on the town. And they killed people. They killed women and children, and committed a massacre against the whites in revenge for the killing. It was an honor killing situation. And then what happened was the white settlers sent word back to the U.S. Cavalry, and the U.S. Cavalry brought in dragoons, armored horse guys, to come in and massacre them with their extreme, significant technological advancement. And this really is, this is this is how all of these kind of things are presented, where it's presented as one day the white settler or the Israeli settler or the whatever settlers is sitting there, fishing on a stream, and the Native American starts shooting arrows at him, and then he shoots he gets out his pistol and shoots back, and the Native American just so happens to die. And the next thing you know, the Native Americans are burning down the town, and you just got to call in the U.S. Cavalry to come and save you. That's how the story always goes. And that's the exact same kind of way that this is saying, well, of course it's bad that a girl got abducted, but they scalped us. Can't we call in the cavalry? And it anesthetizes our brains to being able to view the other side as like a moral actor.
Oh. Okay, so I won't harp too much on that because I think it's super interesting. Because you want to go to the other video. Let's just finish this video. There's like not much left.
Yeah.
Got to leave it there, but thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
That's important to hear that side, and I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, I guess that was it. All right. Let's go to the other video.
I hope I'm not ranting too much, but it feels it's something it feels like so much is that there's just so much deeply necessary context that is just like never talked about, and it's talked about so infrequently. And I think in a big way as well, being Americans, I think that subconsciously, I think we're kind of primed to view these conflicts in these kind of ways. You know what I mean? To view this as settler and the Indian, the cowboy and the Indian. That's deep in American subconscious.
Okay.
There are lots of additional costs to hateful terrorist attacks like that carried out by Hamas, not just in the immediate lives lost or even the trauma that will last a lifetime for the friends and family members who lost loved ones or even worse, were forced to witness it. It spreads across the world. It stokes hatred and bigotry, and in this case, anti-Semitism, which seems to continually rear its head around the world whenever Jewish people feel like they have a place they can feel safe. Just one very small case in point. This just happened at Stanford University here in America. Stanford University has suspended a lecturer following accusations that he directed Jewish students in his class to stand in the corner and described Israelis as colonizers. Students in one of the classes recounted the lecturer blaming the outbreak of violence between Israel and Hamas on Zionists and saying Hamas's actions were part of a resistance. He then asked Jewish students to raise their hands and separated them from their belongings, explaining that he was simulating what Jews were doing to Palestinians. Israeli student leader Noria Cohen told the San Francisco Chronicle. When Cohen said the lecturer asked students how many people had died in the Holocaust, when one student answered 6 million, the lecturer replied, yes, only 6 million. Students said the lecturer told them more people died as a result of colonialism than in the Holocaust, and that colonization was what happened to Palestinians. Cohen and Andre Mandelstam added, they also said students recalled the lecturer separating people in both classes into different groups based on their identities and backgrounds and calling them colonizers and colonized. Greenberg said he'd spoken to 3 students who attended the class, citing their accounts, said that the lecturer had said colonizers killed more than 6 million. Israel is a colonizer. For the record, look at this image that I saw on social media, but it's accurate and it, I think, makes a very stark point. Israel is the tiny blue spot. You can barely even see it. It's in the upper right of the middle there.
Okay, so one of the countries there is covered as Ethiopia. Ethiopia is not Arabs. They actually have their complete own ethnicity. It's totally different. Several of those countries, Moroccans do not view themselves in any way, shape, or form as being like Libyans. They have a very different sense of cultural identity. Same thing with Algerians. Even within Algeria, There is a very deep, a big Maori population who are indigenous or sort of kind of lighter skinned indigenous people of North Africa. This image is like a literal, like a fifth grader's understanding of the world. This is so crazy. It is so ridiculous to push so many of these ethnicities together into just one big glob as the Arab world.
Yeah, and so I'd actually seen this discussion on TYT, so I know what's coming. But part of this discussion is like, well, yeah, Israel hasn't taken over like all of the Middle East, whatever, however you define that, right? As our friend Kobe said, the way they're defining it is ridiculous. But that doesn't mean that they aren't taking over like part of the Arab world, right? Like that doesn't mean like just because there is more of it somewhere else doesn't mean that the actions they aren't doing now isn't colonization. Like it's just like like the weirdest way to look at. I don't know there's a phrase I should be using here. I don't have the vocabulary to like.
Well, I think it's Orientalism. Is what I would probably say. It's really, this is the Muslim. I think somebody in chat says it's correct. They don't have Ethiopia, but it does have Somalia. This is the Muslim world. This is just showing Muslim populations. Now that I kind of think about it a little bit more, and again, that's just like it's even that even makes it even more inaccurate. There are tons of schisms between Muslims.
Yeah. But we'll continue. And so look, the person I had said at the very beginning of the stream, right? That the commenter in TYT that I had a problem with, is this guy right here on your screen. This guy, the things that he had said previously, I'll discuss them later on. But I literally can't take him seriously. I cannot take him seriously on this subject. But we'll continue on.
Arab world is in green. Tell me more about how Israel is colonizing Arab land. I think that characterization personally is ridiculous. In a statement, Stanford University said, without prejudging the matter, this report is a cause for serious concern. Academic freedom does not permit the identity-based targeting of students. The instructor in this course is not currently teaching while the university works to ascertain the facts of the situation. And this new outbreak of violence between Hamas and Israel has led to a spike in tensions on US college campuses, with a truck this week driving around Harvard, for example, identifying students it said had signed a document blaming Israel for the war. Very.
I just wanted to say, because I was like getting water when this first came up, one of the reasons I wanted to watch this was I really think that the way with which that if that classroom transpired just even 1%, like as that's described, that is the most disgusting, racist, and counterproductive way of describing this issue that I could possibly fucking imagine on planet Earth. I just to be very clear, a vast majority of the voices with which I listen to and I research, I like writing my research on, are Jews. Many of them Israeli, many of them as American Jews. Some of the most fervent anti-Zionist I've met are American Jews that view the treatment of Palestinians as being a repeat of the treatment of Jews during the Holocaust, or at least a repayment of the moral sort of urgency of that. The idea that you would take Jewish Americans in a liberal college in the West and sort of treat them in this kind of way that is just, in my opinion, completely counterproductive and completely misses the point and fuels people to want to feel sympathy to Zionism. When you treat them like a Jew, even if and you treat them like a Zionist, you treat them as culpable of the crimes of Israel just because they're Jewish. They're going to feel sympathies to the idea that they're safe in your country, and that's an unacceptable thing, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Scary to just see groups demonized unfairly, and for that to come to our shores.
Yeah, well, Ben, okay, I don't agree with the graphic. I'll tell you why I don't agree with the graphic in a second. And I think that Israel is colonizing Palestinians. But we'll get to that. That's a different and important question. But that doesn't justify anything this professor did. What he did was mental. What are you doing? First of all, Jewish Americans are not Israelis. It's ridiculous to, like, it makes it sound like they have a loyalty to a different country. No, there are brothers and sisters, okay? And they're Americans, they're 100% Americans. Second of all, never separate people based on race, religion. What is that? The Jews go over there, are you insane? That's a lunatic thing to do. And it wouldn't be right if you said the Muslims go over there, or the Christians, the Buddhists, the Hindus, etc. But honestly, especially the Jews. Like the last time people did that, it didn't end well. So this professor is out of his mind. And I don't know why we're having a conversation of colonization versus Holocaust. They're both terrible. Why are you comparing the two? What is the fact that even if colonization was worse, and I hate this conversation entirely about what's worse. They're both horrible. Even if it was worse, what's your point? Does that make the Holocaust okay? No, the Holocaust is one of the worst things that has ever happened in humanity. So the professor is 1,000,000,000% wrong on everything. So now, having said that, Ben, the problem with that graphic is, okay, so they're not, but nobody said they're colonizing all the Arab land, right? And you can't colonize any of the land. It's not, even if it was a tiny part. Here, I'll give you an example from my background, right? So the Turks in the middle of the Syrian civil war decided they were going to take a portion of northern Syria as a buffer zone, okay? And I spoke out against that, and I said that do not stay, okay? I don't think they should have gone in the first place, but they definitely shouldn't stay. Now, you could say, the Turks could turn around and say, look at all this other Arab land, the stuff in green. We didn't take all of it, we just took a portion of Syria. That doesn't justify it. Now, luckily in that case, they did go back, okay? But you see what I'm saying? You don't have to take all the land. Even any land you take is not right. And Israel's not taking Gaza and West Bank, but in terms of whether it's colonizing it, they're occupied. They don't control their own territory. So it's a colonization of a sort for sure.
I disagree completely, because colonization typically connotes that somebody's trying to exploit the resources of a land, trying to extend their territory into foreign, distant lands, trying to get monetary gain of this.
To be distant. The Turks, when they
Ben here doesn't understand colonization. He's going to make that very clear in this conversation. He doesn't actually get it at all. Like, this is what's happening in Israel is clear colonization. Who's trying to exploit the land? What about when you just like take the land? Is that exploiting the land, right? Like, those other people had the land before, and now we've taken it from them. They were using the land as farmlands. Now we're using the land as farmlands. Is that exploiting the lands? I think by exploit he means like mine the lands, or like pump oil from the lands. Is that what he means?
Yeah. He's imagining like the movie Zulu with like, where it's like a British movie about like fighting in South Africa, where it's like you come and you don't even build anything, you just build one little hut or one little village on the side of the coast, and then you just bring all the wealth into these ships and load them onto ships and bring them back to the colonial heartland. Like that's a form of colonialism, but it's like also kind of like, for example, settler colonialism, where your job is to try to make a country for people to live on. That is a very popular time of colonialism. The Nazis did that with Lebensraum. They're going to take over Russia and turn it into living space for Germans. We did that with Manifest Destiny. The Israelis did that with they literally said a land for no people, with a people with no land. And they called themselves the Zionist Colonial Trust. That's what they called. Like, I don't even, they argued that they were going to go and they were going to make the land, make the desert bloom. That was their argument. That's literally the colonialists' argument, is that we're going to go into this untapped resource. We're going to displace the local population, but it's even going to be better for them. We'll create a better civilization on top of this. We'll be able to exploit these lands even better.
Yeah.
Colonized the Middle East, they colonized the people right next to them first, and then Eastern Europe, etc.
Sure, but land that is not theirs is my point.
Yeah, but this is
land that is Israel's.
West Bank and Gaza?
Israel won this land in the 1967 war when they were attacked.
But that's old school, Ben. Old school is I won your land, now I keep it. In the modern world, we're saying we don't do that. Don't do that.
What do you mean? Why is Israel the only country that is held to that standard?
No, everybody is.
Where's America giving back the land we took?
Iraq.
Or we won in war.
So we could have kept Iraq, right? And we did terrible,
keep all of America. We keep our other areas.
And that distinction there is between the modern world and the backwards world, right? And we all lived in the backwards world back then, right? And so we would.
So what Cenk is trying to do, like our friend Iko Rich, who would come on the channel, he likes to make this point, that there is like the new world consensus, is like after World War II, is that borders don't move. That we have conflicts, but borders don't move, and that's actually quite important. That other countries can't come in and just take land. And which is why, like, when Russia has been trying to move its borders, there's been such a strong response against that because borders are not supposed to move. And so Cenk is trying to make a distinction between like World War II, pre this Western aligned consensus, this American consensus, that before we would do that all the time, and the U.S. actively engaged in that, right, all the time. But even now, like in the modern days, like when Iraq and Afghanistan, there was no talk of the U.S. like absorbing. Well, I guess there's some neocons would have said we'll absorb Iraq and, and Afghanistan, maybe, right? But those borders didn't move. Those borders stayed the same during all of that. Right, we didn't do this here in the States. Obviously, like our creation relied on us stealing land, and so Cenk is acknowledging this, but also saying that actually, yes, the rest of the world is held by that standard. That we don't, that the borders do stay the same, and Ben has, like you were saying, a fifth grade understanding of this. He's also said worse things. I'm gonna get to that later. But do you want to say anything else before we move on?
I mean, it's a very frustrating example of sort of wanting to have it both ways. Israel wants to be seen as like a Western democracy that has all these wonderful things that we do, but also we're in a really rough neighborhood. So sometimes we have to do wars of conquest against our neighbors. Listen, okay, sometimes you have to bash, you have to bash the seed of the Canaanite against the rock. That happens to happen from time to time. Okay, you guys, we don't have the luxury of living in the Germany. It's like, okay, damn.
Yeah. And yeah, well, Israel won that land fair and square, so it is there. You saw how he paused there before he said it, because he knew what was about to come out of his mouth was bullshit, right? He knew what was gonna. But like, this is how he actually feels. He said, "Well, of course, all this land is Israel's, and it's not the Palestinians, right? And so the violence that we do against them, that's legitimate." Ben is he's Jewish and he has family in Israel. I'm not sure if he is directly from Israel, but I believe he has just like a lot of family in Israel, but he is a Jewish American. And he's like, yeah, this is our land. Yes, so it's legitimate. We did win win those lands. And so what happens next? Yeah, I mean, who can help it, right? It was won.
Again, just pick one. If they want to not be held to the rules of the international order, and they want to argue that they're in a different territory and they have to deal with different things, then they can't then argue at the same exact time that we need to fund them with billions of dollars because they're a Western democracy. And what if Western democracy is overthrown? That's not. I don't know. It's one or the other. It's one or the other.
And once you say that borders can move, that means that the violence to obtain more land becomes legitimate, right? Because the moment the Hamas or whatever power, or let's say Iran or Lebanon, right? Lebanon comes in like full force and attacks Israel and wins, right? And they take territory. Well, now they won it, and so that violence, right, is like post hoc legitimate. So that's what he's basically saying, is that, well, now it's legitimate. We won that war, and so that violence that we did to win that war is legitimate, and the violence we do afterwards to keep that land is legitimate. But yeah,
countries and empires as a matter of course, Ben is right, would to come in and take their other people's lands, and they wouldn't give it back. Right? That was the old way of doing things. But what we're saying is, in the modern world, we want to be better than that.
Sure. But the biggest issue I have with how you're characterizing it is that when I don't think it makes it in any way sense to say it is colonialism, because they literally are doing this simply for their self-defense and protection. And the Palestinian people that then move into Israel live perfectly fine with Israelis, and whether you like it or not,
perfectly fine with Israelis.
Yeah, we just read
yeah. And they wanted to be expelled. Yeah, the Israelis wanted to expel them, but okay.
In 2005, Israel completely.
Like even during the height of apartheid in South Africa, there were black people that lived in like Durban and Johannesburg that lived like middle class life. There were middle class black business leaders and stuff. They were pro apartheid black people. There were a whole like that's I just can't even. There was something called the 7 civilized tribes, where there were tribes that practiced agriculture and adopted slavery that actually America had a pretty good relationship with in the early days. And they would team up and fight other little tribes. And they'd be like, oh, guys, you got to help us. These barbarian tribes up in the mountains are giving us trouble. And they'd be like, all right, let's go, brother. Let's go. It's just like, it's again, like it is completely historically inaccurate.
There were black slaves, right, who were for slavery because they had a really good life. They had a really good deal there, because they lived in the master's house. And they would defend their masters. They would defend them against revolting slaves. Like, that's the thing that happened, right? They lived perfectly fine, perfectly fine.
Withdrew from the occupation in Gaza and kept security control over the area only because of what you just saw happen this Saturday. Even with security control, the government in charge wants to annihilate the Jewish people from the land of Israel 100% and refuses to negotiate with them a peace agreement. That's literally like saying somebody beats the crap out of you and you respond by pulling out a gun on them, and you're a colonialist now? You're infringing on their rights? No, they've infringed on your rights.
Okay, if you want to pull this forward, this would be equivalent of if somebody come beat you up and then you took them and their family hostage. That's the actual metaphor if we want to run this through. So if I beat the guy up and then I put him in my car and I drive to where do you fucking live? And I took his whole family hostage. And I said, well, they all support him. They're his dad and they love their father. Do you love your father? She even agrees. She still loves her father. And he beat me up. This is insane. What party? Again, I have to ask. This is the complete question. It's like that meme of like the guy running away from the goose. Just ask. What faction assassinated the peace-loving Izop Ramim? I'm pronouncing his name wrong. Who assassinated the president that tried to get peace with the Palestinians? It was not the left. It was not Palestinians. It was not Hamas. It was not the PLO. Not the Black September organization, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon. Anybody. It was a Likud right-wing extremist Zionist.
Protecting yourself. They have no interest in those little swaths of land.
Every single empire says this.
They have no interest in those little swaths of land. Amazing. Amazing. They have no interest in those little swaths of land. Israel, all these decades, have really not really paid attention to it. It's just been like, what's that about? Oh yeah, that's still on the map, huh? Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Leave that alone.
Same thing. So the Turks said, oh yeah, of course the Greeks are impinging upon our land. The Syrians are impinging upon our land. And then they went and kicked their ass and took their land and colonized them. So like in this case, you're not wrong. Yeah, there was a war and the Palestinians killed the Israelis killed the Palestinians, and the Israelis won that land. But I'm hoping that in a decent society, they give it back. And so are they taking, is it just for security? I know that that's the argument that you're making, but the rest of the world does not see it that way, and I do not see it that way.
Right, but that's exactly what I take issue with. Why does the world and you not see it that way? What interest does Israel have in these two tiny swaths of land? What does that do for them?
Water, etc.
But they gave
nonsensical religious.
I would just like to say something that gets brought up a lot. The 2006 charter of Hamas is brought up all the time because the charter of Hamas says that they're going to do all this. It says horrible anti-Semitic things about exterminating Jewish people. It's a very vile document. Did you happen to know that the Likud family or Likud party charter says that Israel has a right to the entirety of the land of Palestine or historic Palestine, and they specifically say from the Jordan to the sea, including Samaria and Samaria and Sumatra, whatever the two places that it's the ancient terms for Gaza and the West Bank. That is it. So again, if we're going to play the what's in your charter, hey, what's that piece of paper behind you? What does that say? Okay, let's apply that to the what is the interest? Ask Likud. I would implore this guy, please. He's so informed about this topic. Tell me what does Likud see in West Bank and Gaza?
Ben Glebe is just completely fucking lost. And look, I'll say it now because he didn't say this in this conversation. He said it in a previous one, in which I just like lost respect for him on this topic. I just can't take him seriously, right? So he's having a different debate with I think this was the 2IT's first discussion on this, or at least when Jank's first discussion on this, because I think he was away at the beginning of the week. In any case, so he had this discussion with Ben, and he talks about apartheid, right? Ben has a problem with Israel being called an apartheid state. And like he says like, well, apartheid involves like, segregation, right? Like, or segregating people. But Israel's not doing that. Israel, in fact, they're integrating, right? The settlements are a form of integration. And so this is not apartheid. That's what this motherfucker said. I'm not kidding, man. This is what he said. It's like you could actually look at it as integration. Brain dead. Brain dead. Can we acknowledge that? Brain dead.
I'll make it very clear. He had to stop himself from talking earlier. He has more it's called having your mask on. He is taking a more tone down to position in public because he believes that Israel has the right to take over all of the land and that they should, as he says, they should assimilate that Palestinian and Muslim and non-Jewish citizens of Israel should assimilate into the larger cultural sphere of the country. At least he seems to agree that the Palestinians can live in Israel. At least he has not said that they need to go live in the Sinai, wander the desert for 40 years, or anything like that.
Yeah. He hasn't yet. At least I'm pretty sure he hasn't called for ethnic cleansing, or like alluded to that. But yeah, he literally thinks that the settlements are a form of integration. That's where like we're just getting closer together, right? After I've bulldozed your house, after I've stolen your farmlands that you've been using for generations, right? And I built my own settlement, and I enforce and the rules of that settlement with violence against all the Palestinians outside. The fact that there are Palestinians like within a 40-mile radius of that settlement means now we've just moved into the neighborhood, right? And now we can have a cultural exchange. It's integration. Yeah, this is the individual we're dealing with, right? Just for context. All right.
Beliefs.
So nonsensical religious beliefs is exactly what the problem is, why they have to keep security control over Gaza, even though they did give back that land.
When you give it back? Ever.
When there's not a terrorist organization running your land.
You're going to call everybody that the Palestinians picked terrorists. You know that.
That is not true.
All right, then why don't you give the West Bank? Why doesn't Israel, not you, why doesn't Israel give back West Bank right now? Not led by a terrorist organization, led by a Fatah.
Because the Netanyahu government currently does not want to negotiate for a two-state solution, and that is the fault. That they're wrong on that. Yes, absolutely. I don't think they have a great negotiating partner on the other side, but they are a partner you can negotiate with. I mean, Secretary Blinken just went and met with the leader of the Palestinian.
The problem is that they always bring up the Hamas has won, had won those elections, right? And that's why we can't have any negotiations, but like that becomes the beginning of history for them. They're like, okay, well then what about like the year before Hamas had won? If Hamas is just like is so horrible, is so like morally bankrupt, right? That we can't be negotiated with. What about the year before? What was happening then? Like, why not? Why we had plenty of time? We had decades to hand over this land, but we just somehow couldn't manage it. Interesting. I don't know.
Authority. He did not meet with the leader of Hamas because these are terrorists, and so when there are people you can speak with, that's why Israel does continually and historically, and even in recent history, goes to the negotiating table.
Yeah,
we don't want to live. The Israeli people don't want to live under the constant threat of missiles and rockets and buses blowing up and random suicide attacks. We would much rather have peace.
I know, but Israel's going about it the wrong way. If the occupation is permanent, the threat is permanent. Whereas when you actually make peace deals like Israel did with Egypt, they haven't had any bloodshed since the peace deal. That was 40, 50 years ago.
Right, because they made a peace deal.
Do the peace deal. Do the peace deal.
With Hamas?
Yes, definitely with Hamas.
Well, they say they won't negotiate.
Easy. No, that's not true at all. Ben, look, I can give
100%
hold on. I can give 100 examples, maybe thousands of examples of the other side being butchers, and we make peace deals, okay? So I'll give you one that happened here in America. During the Civil War, the Confederacy was monstrous to the Northerners. When they captured white soldiers, sometimes they would murder them, sometimes they would lynch them, etc. But oftentimes with the white soldiers, they gave some quarter. But if they captured northern black soldiers, they would mutilate them. They were absolute monsters. And we did a peace deal with them because you don't get to negotiate with angels. You negotiate with monsters that are killing you on the other side.
There was never a charter from the Confederacy saying that their goal is to eradicate
America? That's exactly what their charter said.
From the face of the earth.
Again, like the charter of Likud is to eradicate Palestine from the face of the earth. So if we're going to play this game on one hand, why is it that we get to give infinite $4 billion to one side, and the other side literally by definition, any military incursion they do into Israel is terrorism? One side gets $4 billion, the other side is by definition terrorists. I wonder why one side doesn't really want to come to the conversation. I wonder why one side kind of views like they're, to quote a Palestinian militant leader, do not take the position of the neck in a conversation with the sword. That is very much why I feel like this. I feel like this conversation. Just to be very clear. Again, Hamas wins in Gaza in 2006. Or is it 2007? 1 second. Within this time period. Oh, sorry. 1 second. I actually timed somebody out. I'm going to untime them out in a second here. Okay, I'll do that in a second here. Okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I actually messed up somebody in chat. I'm sorry. I was being authoritarian.
The Palestinians, dump the neck and the sword, and then from there.
Oh no, yeah. And all I was saying here is just that within a year of them taking power and looking like they're going to take power in Gaza, Israel launches a war, the 2006 war with Lebanon, where they fucking lose hella hard to Hamas, and they launch strikes on Gaza, which kill over 100 civilians. That's within a week. Again, how you imagine being the more pro-Israel side in Gaza. You're the pro-compromise side in Gaza, and you guys there's 100 families with dead people. 100 families with dead people. There are entire blocks of homeless people. I believe during the 2006 war with Gaza, I think this might have been 2014 in Cast Lead, but 14,000 people were made homeless. 14,000 people made homeless. I wonder what party they're going to vote for. Who do you think they vote for? Can you remember? I don't know if this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. Hamas started as a charity. Hamas started as a humanitarian organization, and they still have a very large humanitarian organization. During the 2006 Israel war, when they would break into convenience stores to steal bottles of water and to steal candy bars and stuff for to feed themselves, they would leave money behind. I'm not saying that it makes them a good person. That is it's the propaganda war. They recognize they need to present themselves to the Palestinians as they're both the religious charity and also a militant organization. How can the reasonable side possibly have their voice heard when there's a war going on in the north of the country, civilians dying in the north of the country, a war going on in Gaza? They went in 2006, 2007, 2014, Cast Lead, which the Israeli Defense Department describes themselves as going too far in their reprisals against the Palestinians in Cast Lead. Like what seat at the table do the reformers get? It's hard to be a voice of reason to a bunch of suburban college kids on Prime panels when I'm arguing against violence. It's hard for me to be the voice of reason with a bunch of these people. How the fuck can you be the voice of reason when you guys are being bombed?
Yeah. We'll continue on because I wonder. Ben said something else stupid, but I'm not sure if it's in this conversation or another one. But I'll bring it up one way or the other by the time we get to the end of this video.
They kept them as slaves. That was literally their charter was. We are going to keep these people as property, I can't. What's worse than that? We're going to keep them as slaves. Their charter was the most despicable thing in American history. But we still made peace because that's how peace works.
Of course. But they didn't make the peace agreement during the Civil War. They didn't make the peace agreement on the week that they were currently slaughtering former slaves that were fighting for the Union. They did it after the resolution of the war. So I'm glad then that you agree with me that the war needs to be resolved, and then there needs to be a willingness from the other side to negotiate.
Ben, the war is not resolved today because of the current war that Hamas started. Ben is right about that. But we could have 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 2 years ago, I could have picked 2,000 spots where I would say, well, you've got the occupation. Nobody's bombing anyone today. Let's do a peace deal. And Ben already said it. Netanyahu and the right-wing government said no, they don't want it. Well, if you have to get to peace,
but
you
it's
have
also
to, you have to let them go, Ben.
Well, but
you have to.
In an attempt to normalize relations, like you're suggesting, even with Hamas, and this certainly backfired. Netanyahu's government was, through Qatar, was allowing funds, was giving funds to Hamas to gain better control, to be able to govern their own people better, and was trying to normalize relations. And look how that worked out. They came and slaughtered people in their homes, kids and babies and old people.
I gotta go to Jackson, but Ben, 80% of Palestinians need assistance because they don't control their own country in Gaza Strip. They don't control their own countries, so nothing is allowed.
The position Ben here is saying is that, again, Hamas is the governing body of Gaza. Love it, hate it, don't like it, want him. That is the case. If he's saying you can't even give aid money to Hamas, then you're literally saying that we can't even give aid to the Gazans. Gazans have to literally fish out of the fucking sea, I guess.
This is the stance that the American government has with Afghanistan, right? That the Afghanistan is run by the Taliban, and they have this money frozen somewhere. We're not going to give it back, right? Like, there's a humanitarian crisis happening in Afghanistan, and it just literally just keeps getting worse because they've had multiple earthquakes, thousands, tens of thousands are dead. It's just a thing that's happening now that we're not paying attention to. But tens of thousands of Afghans just died last week. That's the thing that happened, in case you forgot. But beyond that, they were all food insecure, lack of infrastructure. And the Taliban has been asking for these funds back, and America won't give it back, right? Because we're butthurt that we lost that war. But guess what? If we are going to have peace, yeah, you negotiate with your enemy, not with your friends, the people you're not fighting with. And it's hard. I'm not saying that's easy because there's bloodshed on both sides. There's grief on both sides, and that I understand. I hear Israelis when they're talking about the deaths that they have suffered, right, both recently and in the past, and to swallow the bile of making peace with the people on the other side. That's not easy. It's not easy for anyone. That's just human nature in general. So I hear you. But that's literally how it works. That's how peace works, is that at some point you make a peace deal with the people that you were fighting, that were doing terrible things to you. We made a peace deal with the fucking Germans, right? We made the peace deal with the Japanese. We make the peace deals with the people who do bad things to us.
Nothing is allowed out, so they're starving. That is not why.
That is not why. The border with Egypt, they could allow anything, and Egypt controls that just as hard, if not harder, than Israel does.
Are 100% allies. When Israel says close the border, Egypt closes the border.
But yet the hatred that comes out in anti-Semitism only comes towards the Jews. Nobody's saying Egypt is being colonial. Egypt is not allowing the.
By the way, that's a fair point, and a lot of.
I was going to say, it's just the idea that Egypt is absolutely viewed as a strongman power in the Middle East by many countries. Israel was, what's his name? Abdel Nasser literally was a military general that did a coup in the 1950s, 1960s, and took over from the Republican government that came. They had a semi-democracy in Egypt after or at least a Republican government after the British left, and he couped them. He took over in the same way that what's it called? Francisco Franco or Augusto Pinochet. He was a military general turned dictatorial leader of the country. They very much are viewed as somebody that they have lots of border skirmishes with their neighbors and stuff. It's very funny. It's no one talks about Egypt, and no one talks about Egypt in your circles.
No. But specifically, he said no one talks about Egypt as colonizers, right? In this context. Well, yeah, because you don't understand what colonizing means, right?
Yeah.
He literally, like I said before, he doesn't get the concept. Well, people aren't calling Egypt a colonizer.
Yeah.
Because they're
they're not colonizing anything because it's it is there. I mean, this is the same excuse that gets brought up with people trying to defend the fucking manifest destiny in America. But they're like, well, how did the Muslims get control of Egypt? It used to be people that worshipped Osiris about 5,000 years ago. And it was like, yeah, dumbass. Yeah, you're right. In 900 AD, the Muslims took over Egypt. And so therefore, who cares? Maybe the Jews can just, or maybe the Zionists rather, can just take over the whole fucking region. I don't know. It's just ridiculous.
Yes.
Pressure should go on Egypt.
It 100% should, but also you can't, in the moment of something, try to expect people to negotiate with people who are killing them. That just doesn't make any sense. And the reason that the resources are so bad in Gaza is not because Israel has a protection on the outside of the territory. They've given 17 years to this terrorist organization to run things better, and they are hugely corrupt. They funnel money to their rich buddies within Gaza and let their people suffer. They build no infrastructure. They take water pipes and turn them.
They literally don't have any building resources because the Israelis won't let them in. After they finished their last bombing campaign years ago, right, and they leveled those neighborhoods, they didn't allow building resources in. When ships tried to come into Gaza, they turned them away, right? The Israeli Navy turned them away. I remember seeing videos of this, right? When they were turning them away. And so when he's saying, well, they haven't, they let their people in squalor, they have no fucking choice about that.
Them into rocket launchers. They do not care about keeping their people. And in fact, right now, when Israel, before this ground invasion, has been dropping leaflets and making announcements and telling the UN, granted, it's very hard to move 1 million people that quickly, but saying, get out of there, move to the south, we're gonna be coming in. Hamas is saying, don't believe it, stay where you are, and telling them to keep in place because they don't care about the lives of their own people. They would rather have them as shields to be able to further their evil aims.
Hamas is terrible.
And the settlers are being used as shields for Israel, right? You put these settlers there, and then you it's not just like a military encampment. They don't just put like a military base there, or why not? Like if you want to do that, why don't you just put soldiers there? Because those soldiers, everyone can agree, are legitimate targets, right? You put settlers there, and then they have families, they have communities, and if people attack from the outside, well, look what you butchered these citizens, these innocent citizens. Yeah, that's literally their purpose. That's why they arm those people to the teeth, because they know that they're on the front lines. This is why they're there.
Have you ever heard have you ever heard of strategic hamlets? Ever heard the term? Strategic hamlets was something that the American military did in Vietnam, where we would move villages. We would like take a village and like move it to another place. And we literally did this exact thing where they would move basically villages of people really, really close to these various military encampments deep in North Vietnamese territory, so that if the chances of there being civilian casualties was much. It made it so the Vietnamese just didn't want to attack the base as much. If there is within the hypothetical distance of the base a little village of civilians and farmers, you're not going to want you're going to have less of an impetus to attack it if it's just a lone military base where who cares? The mountain could be blown to smithereens. Who cares? It's a very, very nasty tactic, but it's you see it.
It's called mobile hamlets, or
also in Vietnam they call it strategic hamlets.
Strategic. Okay, interesting. Thank you.
All the things you say about Hamas are right. They still should not try to move 1.1 million people. When the Turks moved that many Armenians, it was called a genocide. That's what it was called, and that's correct. It was correctly labeled that. Do not move people and do not indiscriminately bomb.
And I think it's pretty clear that Israel has had interest in that land, and that doesn't justify anything that Hamas has done. But governments and political factions always have interest, geopolitical interest in taking land. So I think to go back to where we first started with the story of Israel colonizing, you can't really justify that. And then for this professor that had people stand up, that's just ridiculous. Not only is it ridiculous, but it's really whack, it's petty, and it's lame. And I think that anybody who goes down that road should be fired, should be held to account. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see quite a bit more of that in regards to, again, right-wing commentators continuing to spew hate for Jewish people and also for the Palestinians. It's kind of full circle.
That's a note we could all agree on. What the professor did was incredibly stupid and totally unacceptable.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They
So the thing that Ben had said, other thing that Ben had said, he was basically doing a thing where Hamas is like an equal and opposite aggressor to the Israelis. And so we shouldn't look as the Israelis as like bullies in this situation. He talked about like how, uh, like I think it was Jank, if I'm remembering this correctly. He brought up that like United States is backing the Israeli army, pouring money into them, right? And he says, well, well, Hamas has Iran, right? So no one brings that up. They have Iran, this country, a fraction of our economy, this country, this a pariah state, who doesn't have access to the international banking system, can't freely move weapons and material to Hamas, like can't make the infrastructure. The Hamas like literally can't have military bases, like legitimate military bases, standing military bases because they'll just get bombed by the other side. Yes, Iran does support Hamas, right? But these aren't equal and opposite forces. But he seems to think that's the case. Well, you have Iran.
Yeah, no, it's his bias is obvious. And I think in a lot of these times when somebody that seems it's like you're way smarter than what you're actually saying. Like I know you're not this stupid. It's just because again, like they're lying. They have deeper they have deeper, more extreme views with which they would use. And if he just said, well, again, they just have the right to the land, so it's their land. That's
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
We went a little bit over when I wanted to go, so
Yeah.
I hate to want to give. I always enjoy talking to you about this subject. I feel like we agreed for the most of the part. It wasn't any kind of debates, which those are always fun, but it's always good to have
Yeah.
camaraderie.
Yeah. Shout out to oh, Aiko, thank you for resubbing. My Prime anniversary is next month. Oh yeah, 2 years. It'll be 2 years with us. Thank you, friend. Hey, Aiko, I had invoked your name earlier. I think you'd be happy to know. Talking about like the international order, and how borders don't move. I invoked you, because you came up and you're such a great guy. Anyway, thanks for being here, friend. Thanks for supporting the channel. We're going to head out now because our friend Kobe has to leave. But this has been a really great conversation, and as always, I enjoy having my friend Kobe here. He adds so much to this conversation. Hit the follow button. I haven't done so yet. Hit the follow button here on Twitch, or subscribe on YouTube for more of this. International rules-based order. That's the term I was looking for, but I didn't have it on my on me. But yeah, international rules-based order. Yes, I did invoke you, Aiko. Thank you for talking to me about that, and I could use this in this conversation. Anyway, I'll have to send you off, even though I would love this conversation to continue, because Kobe's so great. But we'll raid Stardust. And we're raiding now. We'll talk to you again in the future. I'm just waiting for this to go through and awkwardly talking to you while the raid goes down.